Can he record this entire voiceover in one take? We will see. But starting out here, this is going to be my warm-up for my leg day. I'm starting with, I believe these are called elephant walks. Usually you would do them one foot or the other, or maybe gorilla pose. It's one of the two. I think if you're doing both feet, it's gorilla pose. If you're doing one foot back and forth, it's elephant walk. But someone can correct me on that if they know the correct name for it. I like to do these because I find that it's good for my hamstrings in this kind of stretch position at the top to open up their mobility, as I do sometimes have issues with hamstring mobility, which then in turn can kind of lead to a little bit of soreness whenever I'm working out. And then this one is going to be just a standard side lunge movement that I'm doing, just going back and forth and trying to make it dynamic. That way I'm not holding the position for too long, as it's not as beneficial for a warm-up, even though it is great for mobility. And then I'm going to transfer right from doing those side lunges into these Cossack squats. I like to pop my heel up, kind of how you can see that I'm doing on that one side, because I feel like that rotation just opens up my adductors a little bit more, and that's kind of the main thing that I'm focusing on here, is opening up my adductors. Now we're going into these ATG split squats, and I'm trying to keep my knee off the ground. You can't see it from this angle, but I'm keeping my back knee off of the ground, and then I'm trying to close that angle on my front leg so my calf is touching my hamstring. The reason I'm doing this is mainly for like a quad and hip flexor opener, and then you'll see I'm going to start here with doing almost like a very wide lunge to help with my knee and just kind of mimicking that squat pattern that I would be doing on that front leg. And then also a little bit of balance work. As you can see, I'm trying to stay upright here and have a upright posture. And then I'm going to be doing the same thing on the other leg here. So again, maintaining that wide stance, keeping that back knee off of the ground, having an upwards upper body posture, and then trying to have that hip flexor on that back leg stretch as much as possible, while again having my hamstring touch my calf on that front leg. And then I'm again going to be doing a couple almost long lunges here, trying to work on that knee and keeping that stable so that when I'm doing my squat movements and my quad movements in general, I'm gonna be not having any issues with, pain or discomfort while doing that. And then the next movement that I'm going into, and the final one for my warm-up, is gonna be this calf stretch on the wall. I usually start off my workouts with calves, and so I kind of like to have the last stretch that I do be the calf one, so that way it's closest to the working set. So it's the most recent thing that I've warmed up, essentially, if that makes any sense. And you don't need to pretty much be kissing the wall like I am right here. If you have like a little lip of a stair or something that you can do, that's probably better so you don't look like a goofball. But I had to record this for you guys, so yeah, you can kind of laugh at me if you want. But yeah, so now we're going to get into the workout here. This is just the last one on this side and into the movements. Now, standing calf raise, again, this is done over seated, as you're going to be able to target the gastroc and soleus a lot better than if you were doing seated, which is going to be predominantly more soleus, which is that deep muscle to the gastroc in the calf. You don't need to know all the terms and stuff. This isn't going to be on the test, guys, but unless you're in this field, then it will be on the test. But for these, what I like to do is go heavy and get to a point where, again, I'm in that 6 to 12 rep range. And then on the way down, I want to get as far down as I can. If you have less ankle mobility than me, it's going to be not as far, but that's perfectly fine. And then I'm doing these partials at the end here, where I'm not getting all the way up, but I'm trying to get as high up as possible. I believe I got 9 reps on this one with a higher weight than usual, so that's pretty good. And then partials all the way down to where I can't get the weight up. And then boom, we're doing 2 sets, which are the 2 sets that I do for all working sets on all of my movements, instead of just the 1 set that I've done in the past couple days that I've done these videos. So everybody say thank you in the comments for that, as I'm giving you more for the video. Now, I believe on this one I got 8 reps, and that's what you kind of want to see when you're working out, is if you're pushing yourself close to failure or to failure, if you're doing 2 sets in a row, and it's, let's say like 10 reps and then another 10 reps, you didn't push hard enough on that first set, because you shouldn't be able to push to the same amount of reps. You should slightly fatigue, and so otherwise you're not pushing hard enough, so that's kind of a sign to that. Now again, getting in these partials here, barely able to get the last rep up, and then we're going to move into the next movement. Now this is the sucker that I'm going to talk about in the post-lift talk a little bit, so stick around for that as we're going to kind of address this movement. This is a stiff-legged deadlift, or an RDL, focusing on bracing my core, trying to keep a neutral back and neck posture, And then I also have my wrist straps on for these, as holding 95s for multiple sets in a row would really kind of burn out my forearms, and I don't want to be limited by my forearm strength. I want to be limited by my hamstring and glute strength. Now this is going to work a little bit of your erectors, so your back muscles. However, mainly I'm trying to focus on my hamstrings and glutes in this one, as that's kind of the main focus here. And for these, honestly, they're pretty brutal for me. I definitely notice that I get a lot of fatigue buildup from these. The next couple days after doing them, my hamstrings are pretty shot, and you can kind of see it on my face while doing these, that it's definitely fatiguing. Now, fatigue isn't a bad thing if you're, someone who's trying to avoid being sore at all times. It's just simply not the case if you're training hard that you can do that, and so that's perfectly okay. And again here, going for the 6 to 12 rep range. I can't remember the exact amount of reps that I got on either of these, but a 95 in each arm, and being able to do in the 6 to 12 rep range controlled, I'm pretty happy with that. I've been progressing this one pretty high in terms of my reps and weights over time, so I am liking the progress I'm seeing on that, as hamstrings are kind of a weak point for me when it comes to lower leg. Now, I usually do a hack squat movement. However, this kind of pendulum setup is what I had access to, as all 3 of the hack squats were taken, and the 4 leg presses at my gym were also taken. So this is what I was left with, which is perfectly fine. I haven't done this movement since like the first day that I started at this gym, so it was kind of nice to come back to. I do wish there was a little bit more range of motion. As you can see that I'm reaching parallel, but I mean, like, I can definitely get deeper than this. If you guys have seen me hack squat, you know that I have pretty good hip, knee, and ankle mobility, so I could definitely get farther, and I would prefer to for getting my quad growth. But you got to work with what you got. You can't fight people off the machines, or if you do, you're not a really great gym goer. But can't control anyone else, so just got to do what you got to do. And it's good to be adaptive. It's good to be able to go to a different movement and still perform it well. You don't want to get locked into, just only being able to do these movements. That kind of makes you mentally stiff, I will say. And so being able to adapt to doing different machines is probably a good thing. Now, if you are someone who has a machine like this, but it doesn't have this, steep angle for where my foot is, what you can do is put a plate on there and then stand on the plate, but I wasn't really trying to risk it with the incline that my foot's on. I didn't want it sliding down on me while I was doing this, and that will bring your feet higher, which will then in turn make the knee angle that you're at the bottom of the movement more drastic, so you're getting more depth. So if you have a machine like this and you want more depth, there's a kind of tip for you to go for. And I don't even remember what the weight that I was using on this. It was a little bit lighter because I haven't done this machine again in forever. So I was pushing close to failure, but I think my rep range was a little bit higher than usual. So again, I try and aim for 6 to 12. I think I was at the higher end of that. So if I was to use this machine again, I would definitely up the weight, but I was a little unsure. Now going into the next movement here, we're going to have seated hamstring curls. I'm leaning forward with these. Reason being that I'm leaning forward is you're going to close that hip angle a little bit more. Now, I've addressed this before, but I'll address it again. The hamstring is going to cross the knee and hip joint, so that back portion of your leg muscle on that upper leg, so attaching on your femur, it's going to run behind the knee and then go all the way up and slightly past the hip. So when I'm bringing my upper body forwards like this, when I have my leg all the way out at the top, like right there, it's going to be fully stretched, and so I'm getting a longer stretch portion, and then I'm getting a better contraction out of that instead of just leaning back. So if you can do a setup like this, it would be a little bit more beneficial. However, it's not an end-all be-all if you can't. And then same thing here, trying to get that lean forward. I could have set the back height a little bit more forwards, that way I have a little bit more back support, but I'm trying to focus on bracing my core so it's not really that big of a deal. And then trying to push again close to failure. 0, 1, or 2 reps away from failure is what you're going for at all times if you can. This was after a active rest day and another just like pretty much straight rest day, so I was feeling pretty good and I was able to push myself pretty hard on a lot of these movements. It's okay to take rest days. You don't need to be in the gym every single day, and I was feeling very fatigued, so having that rest day, or those 2 rest days, really helped me to be able to progress on this leg day, which is just going to mean more growth overall. So leg extension here, I'm setting up the seat, that back pad, as far back as I can, as I want to have my hip angle wider this time instead of more closed. Reason being, the top quad muscle, or the rectus femoris, that's going to be that like middle quad muscle that runs up to your hip. It does cross your hip joint, and so having your hips open like this is going to be able to activate that a little bit more. And then final set here for the day of this leg day. Again, trying to push myself as hard as I can and focusing on my breathing. So if you watch back any of these clips, you should be able to see that I'm inhaling on that downwards or that eccentric, and then I'm exhaling on that concentric. So if you were to go back and watch, I should hopefully be doing that on all these. Otherwise, I'm a bad coach out here not doing what I teach. But yeah, into the post-lift talk.
I almost forgot about you guys. I almost didn't record this post-lift talk. That would have been bad. I would have had to record it a different day. But anyways, leg day done. Felt a little weird in my hamstring at one point, so I might honestly take deadlifts out of the plan, or the stiff-legged deadlifts or RDLs. Depending on how I do them, it kind of looks, like one or the other. So call it what you want. But I might take them out of the plan in all honesty. I have kind of like issues with my hamstrings at points where I just kind of feel a twinge or something. And it's never like crazy bad, but I've had it, kind of act up a couple times doing a couple movements. So I might just go to lying hamstring curls instead. We'll see how I'm feeling. But this post-lift talk, I wanted to talk about nuance and context. So if you follow me on my other platforms, TikTok and Instagram, where I mainly post like shorts and stuff like that, I do on YouTube, but not as consistently. So if you're not following me on those, make sure to follow me there. That way you see like more content from me. But the reason I want to talk about context and nuance is because people like to take things out of context, or they don't like to apply nuance when they say things. So I've been making a bunch of posts specifically about nutrition because I've had a lot of people talk about nutrition to me because there's a lot of misinformation within nutrition. And I'm not going to bring up specific examples or anything because I don't want to call anyone out specifically, but I do want to say that we have to understand the big picture in order to apply it to circumstances. Now, the way that scientists do this is they try to eliminate variables, but then they have to understand that in the real world, things happen, okay? So if we're looking at a study and we're doing EMG data, which would be the electromagnetic response to the stimuli of our muscle, that contraction that we get whenever we do a movement, that's how they assess it, is with EMG data. So if we're doing a leg extension and we're, contracting up and down, it's gonna see how much of that quad is activating. Same thing on like a squat. And then let's say we wanna compare the two and say, okay, well, according to EMG data, the leg extension is going to be more beneficial than the squat. And so a lot of people would say, okay, well, if I only do one quad movement in my leg days, I want it to be leg extension. Now, on paper, that looks great, 100%. However, if we apply this to the real world, let's say you work out from home, you don't have a leg extension. Guess what? Best thing, out the window. Let's say you work out at the gym, leg extension's always taken. Guess what? Out the window. Let's say your gym doesn't have it. I know it's a common machine, but just for this example here, they don't have it. Boom, out the window. Does that mean that you should just quit the gym and just live life with chicken legs because you can't do the best movement? Absolutely not. And so for you, the best movement then is probably the squat. If you have access to the squat at home, if you have access to, a squat machine or a barbell or, a dumbbell, whatever else that you can squat with, that's now your number one movement. And so a lot of people like to say, okay, well, this is like the only way that you can do it. You can only do leg extension because that's the best movement. But it might not be for someone. And so you have to apply a little bit of context and a little bit of nuance to things when you're talking about it. An example with nutrition that I was talking about with somebody, again, I'm not gonna, name the person or whatever, but they were saying that artificial sugars are worse than natural sugars. And no context was given. It was just a blanket statement saying added sugars are bad. And so the example that I gave is, okay, apple juice could be an added sugar. If you pressed and squeezed down an apple and you put it into a product, let's say we're making like fruit snacks, right? And we use that as a added sugar. It's not an artificial sugar, but it is an added sugar. And they had no response. They didn't know what to say because we have to use context and we have to use nuance with things when we're talking about this stuff. Now, this isn't me trying to be all high and mighty and say, oh, I know, like all the context about this stuff. I don't. I'm still learning stuff within this field. However, I've been in this field as a trainer for 5 years, as an online coach for over 2. I've been lifting since I was in 8th grade. on and off. Sometimes for sport, sometimes I took time off. I haven't been the most consistent in years past, but I've been consistent before with it, and I've learned about this stuff a lot. So we have to understand that in a vacuum, sure, something looks great or something might be better. Natural sugars might be better in a lot of cases, but that doesn't mean that artificial sugars are bad. A lot of long distance runners will consume artificial sugars because they're easy to digest and they're a lot less harsh on their stomach compared to natural sugars. And so when you're running for long bouts on end and you start noticing that you're getting some indigestion, you don't care if it's natural or artificial. You're gonna do the thing that helps you to run better. Same thing with, the gym and bodybuilding, let's say. If you're a bodybuilder, a lot of people eat Rice Krispies before the gym. They're super quick to get into your system. They give you the blood sugar spike that you need in order to work out well, and you might benefit from it. But if we were to replace that with natural sugars that have more fiber, sure, you might feel more full going into the gym, but you don't need to feel full to lift well. You need energy. And so if it takes longer for you to digest all of that food, because if we wanted the same amount of sugars from an apple, we're probably gonna have to eat more. And also the fiber is gonna slow down that digestion process. That in turn is going to equal us not having as much fuel readily available for our workouts. And so we might actually be in a situation where the Rice Krispie is better than the apple for that specific situation. Now, I don't want people coming at me and saying, oh my God, he just said Rice Krispies are better than apples, okay? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, given the context and the constraints that I set up here, that is a situation or two situations with the runner example that a artificial sweetener or sugar could be better for performance for a specific scenario. And so context and nuance is important. Also, one last thing at the end here that I wanted to say, if you like these type of videos, like, comment, subscribe. If you like the more talking style instead of the lifting style, go make sure to check out my page. I do presentation videos where I talk about things more. And so that I give a little bit more context than just like the clip at the end here, where after my workout. So if you like the more breakdown videos of science and stuff, that's on my page. I post one of those every week. And then I'm gonna post a lifting video every week as well. So I'm gonna alternate back and forth between the two. 2 videos a week is what you should be able to see here in the, near future. So if you like the content, make sure to subscribe, turn the bell notification on. That way you get notified when I post. That way you can see more of me and learn more about lifting and nutrition and lifestyle and fitness.